This is Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. Welcome back. You know, we don't talk much about pickup trucks on this show, but let's be honest, the pickup truck is an American original, and it's as important as any vehicle you can think of. And classic trucks have a special place in the car hobby. So today's show is all about taking that classic truck to the next level. My guest is Jason Noel, the founder of Fat Fender Garage. Jason and his team take classic Fords and Chevys into the modern era with chassis and mechanical systems that are more in pace with today's driving expectations, but you don't sacrifice any of the classic look. I know a lot of you out there have trucks, you use them as workhorses, but they're also kind of special, right? So I think you're going to love this episode. Here's my conversation with Jason Noel of Fat Fender Garage. Enjoy. Jason, you were a carpenter. You are a carpenter still. I guess that stays in your blood, right? But
Jesus was a carpenter, right? So I'm trying to follow his footsteps a little bit here. But I did. I started off as a carpenter in life. I had a 66 Volkswagen Bug in high school, and I did everything under the sun just to keep it running. And I still love those. You can kind of, behind me, you can see a nod to the Volkswagen, still in me. But I kind of vowed to I want to go make a living, do some carpentry, and, so that's kind of how, but yeah, I love carpentry. I'm still a carpenter today.
Are you a finished carpenter?
I am a finished carpenter. So, molding, millwork, doors, case, base, crown, design it. I had my own molding machines. We had, cabinets and different things we made. I've installed miles and miles of casing and base, hundreds and hundreds of miles, and crown molding and
wainscoting and
$20 million homes. I look back in the day at all the stuff that we did back then, and it was pretty impressive back then. It was really fun. But there's new chapters in life.
So just for the audience, I didn't know that you were a finished carpenter, but I kind of had a feeling because the builds you guys have out of Fat Fender Garage and the chassis, it's got that analytical precision, that fastidiousness that I know is like, you have to have that if you're a finished carpenter. If you don't have that, you're just banging your head against the wall and you're not very successful. So yeah, I could tell that right away.
I unfortunately for my guys, I have an eye that picks up anything out of alignment. I can stand back and look at something and I'm like, hey, that's about 1/8 of an inch off from the cab. Like, we need to make an adjustment there, go figure out what's off, and they'll sit there like, how do you know? And I'm like, I'm just so used to lines and parallels and all these years of just installing things and working with rough carpentry that was drywalled over and it's not good. And my job is to make what we install look good over what's bad. When we'd do carpentry back in the day, we'd cut a miter and they'd put it together and they'd say, is that good enough? And I said, if I can put a piece of paper through it, it's not tight enough.
So as a carpenter, carpenter's got to have a work truck. What was your work truck?
So my very first work truck, when I finally decided I'm going into finished carpentry, I need a truck, was a 1995 Mitsubishi Mighty Max, and I put a shell on it, and I loaded all my tools up in it, and I was ready to go to work. Got hired on with a company. They were one of the top companies in St. George, Utah, where I was living at the time, and I started doing finish work, and I thought I'm pretty good at this. Like, I'm talented. Of course, I'd been carpentry related in high school and took 3 shop classes. So I was pretty heavily focused on woodworking to begin with. But I thought, you know what? I'm pretty good at this. I'm probably one of their top employees. And it's only been like 6-7 months, and I'll start my own business. That's the next thing you do, is you start your own business. So here I am at 24 years of age, starting a business. And I had zero idea what that was going to be like. It was one thing to do carpentry. It's another thing to run a business.
The Mitsubishi it earned you your keep, right?
It did. And then I sold it. I got a 68, 72 pickup truck after that because I was like, I want a classic truck to drive around, an old Carpenter classic truck. So I had an old C10 that I drove, and then I tried to pull a trailer with it, and that didn't work really well. So then I went into a silver 97 Z71 pickup truck, right? And then that was cool. But I've always owned a truck. I've never not had a truck. I've never not driven a truck. Like, I'm always in a truck. I'm not a mechanic. That's what I try to tell people first and foremost. Sometimes people like, "Oh man, you must have grown around this stuff and you know everything about." I was like, "I do not. I definitely cut my teeth and I've learned some stuff, in the past, 12 years, but I entered this, with just kind of a eyes wide open. Let's just see how fast we can learn some stuff.
Well, and that's what I was wondering about is how you go from finished carpenter to a premium builder of classic trucks with modern underpinnings. That's, one of the things about old vehicles, we all love them. The people who listen to this show love them, but they're also a big headache at times, and you have to know their limitations. And there's always that temptation to sort of upgrade or improve. But one of the problems with that is that you start messing with one system and you see
Snowballs.
snowball effect, yeah.
We'll have people come in and say, "Hey, I've got this little problem with my truck." And as we go look at it, we're like, "Yeah, but if I fix that, then I have to fix this, and then I have to fix this, and where does that end?" And so it's tough. I fell in love with old pickup trucks because they've kind of filled like this feeling, this nostalgicness of just like a another time and place of the working man. The guy that got out into the field, he worked, he threw his tools in there, he went down, whether he went to the lumber yard or whatever he was doing, he was a guy who was the working man out there working and he drove his truck. And I fell in love with these things because they all have this, like, history of blue collar workers just making it happen in America. And yet it's and I kinda looked at this truck like, it's time for this truck to retire and to graduate into its new life, its new lease on life. And so for me, I just kind of felt like I was taking these trucks and saying, "Hey, you've been set aside, you've been parked, you've been, like you're not good anymore. You took care of a family for decades, you put food on the table for someone, and you're kind of parked out there in the field and you're rotting away. What if we could just take that and bring you back, bring the value of what that truck did for all these years and bring it back to life again, kind of like, you know, restore it obviously, but revive that truck and give it a new lease on life and let's make it better." If you think of like remember the old TV show, The $6 Million Man?
Sure.
Body's worn out, and the part of it in the beginning is like, we're gonna make it faster, stronger, more capable, and I kind of think of, just like that's what we're doing is just saying, "Hey, let's allow somebody to jump back in a truck like they used to, feel the memories, feel the history, feel all that kind of stuff, but let's make it to where people can have a lot of fun with it."
Absolutely. And what you just said makes me think of things like, the Model AA Fords. They were workhorses through the 30s and 40s, or the Pilot House Dodges.
Mhm.
And also, you made me think of that song "Wichita Lineman" by Glenn Campbell. I picture him out on the prairie somewhere climbing a pole, but his truck is always underneath him, and it's good to go.
Yeah, yeah, it just kinda.
I've got that nostalgia the same way that you do.
Yeah, it's just I mean, cars were great, but cars were always a better built product, just hands down. I can take a 1956 Ford truck and a 1956 Ford car, and man, they that was meant to take care of your family, your wife was probably driving it, like, it had to be a little bit nicer, but the truck was just like, "Let's just get it to the guy, let's get it to the farmer, let's get it to work," and so it never really was meant to have the quality, the refinement, and so for me, it was a paradox of the 2 that we're going to do something with trucks that they were never meant to be, and let's make them that, and then the question mark is, how do we do that?
It's true, and you see that Not necessarily in a top-of-the-line classic truck, because people did spend the extra money for those refinements, but if you look at sort of a low or mid-range classic truck, you'll see that a lot of them had kind of a white painted interior, and then the exterior color was your choice, but the interiors were kinda all the same, and, the door panels were steel instead of, upholstered, things like that, rubber floor mats instead of carpet. The list goes on and on, so, yeah, trucks the industry has changed so much, now trucks are sort of a status item in a lot of ways, a luxury item.
Denali, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, but back in the day, they really were just purpose-built, and everybody kind of accepted that. I suppose one of the exceptions would be the Cameo pickups that Chevy built from, 55 through 58?
Yeah, those are pretty cool. I think the fiberglass, sides and yeah, those were really cool and, kind of like that. We're trying to give you something a little bit nicer, but, the cabs were like the same, just
Yeah.
close enough is perfect.
So, how did Fat Fender Garage get started?
Well, finished carpentry took a sad turn when 2008 decided to stop building houses, and so I stopped trimming houses out. And so we stopped making doors, stopped making molding, and so we did a lot of like customization, like high-end doors. And I was always the designer behind all that stuff, so I'd come up with a lot of creative ways to make some really fancy things. And then so when we got into the pickup side of stuff, it really was just by happen chance. My father-in-law bought an old pickup truck. Someone owed him some money, so he went and accepted payment for this. And so he said, "Hey, I've got this truck. Do you want to help me fix it up a little bit?" And so I said, "Sure." And so, me and him and my uncle, and we just kind of tinkered around on it. And of course, they says, these old beds got wood in them. Do you think, Jason, you could make a wood bed? I was like, "Pff, obviously, we can knock it out of the park." And so we did that and we sold it and we made some money. And he said, "Let's do another one." That was pretty cool. So we had done probably 4 or 5 and we were having fun. And it started to fill a void in me that I was missing because I'd gotten into real estate and I was kind of bored with real estate. I was like, this isn't, it's very transactional. It's very, sign some papers and we're done, right? And it didn't feel like that creative side of me. I was used to designing and creating and feeling like, we were creating something. Personally, I started to develop a style. And so I started to kind of come into who I was as kind of a car. I wouldn't consider myself a designer, but someone who could put things together and some continuity through it all and it works. So I started to find some different clients that liked it and were willing to trust us and allow us to push a little bit and test some things out and see if it would work. And so I eventually felt like we were starting to gel as a company. We were working on solving problems, coming up with solutions, not just everything being a one-off custom truck. Because if I notice like, hey, that was a great idea we had, we would do that again if we did another truck, just like that. So why don't we make that part 10 times and then we'll have it again for us and then we can post it up for sale as a part that other people may want. And when we started to kind of like create and design and work through, some of the nuances of the builds, we started to figure out a look, figure out a, kind of like a style, a feel, products, parts. And as we leaned into that and gave my guys like a creative opportunity to, create parts themselves, we slowly started to gain a little bit of momentum.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to say if you enjoy Horsepower Heritage, there are a few ways you can support the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. There's a link in the show notes. You can make a one-time donation or you can support the show monthly. It's easy, and for the price of a latte, you can help me continue to bring you more of the people and stories behind the machines. You can also leave 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify because that helps new listeners discover the show. Thanks for your support, and now back to the show. By the way, the name Fat Fender Garage, that's a Ford reference, right?
It is and isn't. And I was looking in the very beginning of like, hey, I need a name. What are we going to come up with? And so I was Googling hot rod terminology, just anything related to hot rods. And I was starting to really fall in love with the 1956 Fords. And so I said, well, we'll just go with Fat Fender Garage. I mean, people I think will remember that.
Are you surprised at how hot classic trucks are in the marketplace right now? And I don't mean just custom builds, but a nice, clean F100 is going for big money now.
It is. And I am surprised because historically, those have not been, the go-to hot rod. It's your Camaros, your Mustangs, your
Dodge
GTOs,
Charger. Yeah.
Dodge Chargers. Yeah, and in the car world, it feels like it's pretty evenly balanced. When you think of like, well, you got the Pontiacs and you got the Olds 442, you've got these really cool cars and all the different, automakers. But when it comes to trucks, it's not the same. Dodge has, like you said, the Pilot House and some of these, quirky things. They were not as popular as the trucks like Chevy and Ford. They were the truck kings and everybody else is. And it has stayed that way. I mean, even today, a Dodge truck is still, it's not sought after. And I say that now, but it will be, because people are going to want something different. And that's kind of what happened with the Fords is the Chevys have just, dominated the truck scene for a while. So I am shocked, but at the same time, I think people are understanding trucks really are cool. And I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think people really are excited about the trucks. And I think they can still find some good deals out there and you can still find some clean ones out there. A lot of trucks were sold. And so it becomes a huge market. It's shocking, but at the same time, it's also really exciting.
Old trucks also have a pretty great survival rate, I would say. And part of that is just there were more of them built. They built so many that more have survived despite many of them living hard lives. They were often overloaded,
Mhm.
they got beat on the job site every day, I've seen trucks going down the road just sitting on the frame loaded up with stacks of drywall or bags of concrete, so it shouldn't be a shocker that they need a little bit more attention sometimes than an automobile would.
Yeah, yeah. We had a truck in here. We're trying to 3D scan it the other day. I said, "Hey, can you take that bed off and so we can scan it?" I come back like 4 hours later. I'm like, "What is going on?" Like, it's just like 6 bolts and get it off. They're like, "The bed is welded to the chassis."
Oh, no.
I was like, "Oh, of course it is." So, bolt breaks and, just easy thing to do is just grab that stick welder out and put a big old bead there.
Yeah.
That'll do.
That's called a farmer fix.
That is. So, a lot of those.
Jason, how did you go from building one project at a time, maybe having to look for the customer at the end, versus now you're building full custom chassis, your proprietary chassis, right? And literally every system has been thought out and executed. I mean, that's a big leap.
Honestly, I feel a lot of stress for my customers and just myself when we've hired a company, we've contracted it, we've hired it, and they don't come through. It messes up timing. It messes up just a lot of things. Maybe it had to be done for somebody's wedding or whatever it is. And you're just like, I have no control of the outcome here. And so we decided if we couldn't get what we needed, we were going to just do it ourselves at any given point. And we will work with people as much as we can. If we cannot get exactly what we want, when we want it, and the quality that we expect, we'll do it ourselves. So that's been painting. We do all of our in-house painting. We have our own upholstery shop. We do all of our own in-house upholstery. Then we make kits. We sell it to other people. We sell it to other builders. We have our chassis production line where we build our own chassis and we design those and we use them. And so we're testing and testing and testing and everything under one roof. And so it gives us the opportunity to remove the friction, if you will, through all of that. And so, we just became a Ford Performance licensed distributor recently.
So I got to say, the chassis are a work of art. They're beautiful. It looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you're either laser cutting them or you're water jet cutting them.
It's all laser cut. Laser cut, yeah, press, brake, all that stuff. We're using the best of the best equipment.
Yeah, I can see where you do the press brake on the chassis rails,
Mhm, mhm.
and it's all, certain things are integrated into the chassis, right?
Well, yeah, so we couldn't sell you a regular chassis, just bare metal, like, "Hey, I can do this myself. I wanna save some money." Others are like, "Hey, I don't wanna have to figure any of this out. Like, can I get the engine put in it? Can I get the transmission put in it? Can I get my brakes installed, my brake lines, my fuel tank, my fuel rails, so that when I get it, put the radiator in it, plumb it, wire it, and I'm ready to go." And so it speeds up the process. So when you buy it that way, you're actually buying time. You're gonna speed that build up, and it's gonna, go quickly.
Yeah, and the fact that you have a coilover suspension is awesome. I mean, super comfortable, much greater control and roadability.
Yeah, coilovers, we do airbags. We're also providing, here soon, you'll be able to purchase on our chassis, active suspension, where you just go on your app and you go, "You know what? I like it a little bit softer right now. My wife's coming in the car or the truck with me. I better soften it up. I like a performance ride, but she likes it soft, so I'll soften that up for her. She's gonna be so happy with me." And you'll just go to your app on your phone, change it to a different setting, softer, more comfortable, and she's gonna be happy.
Nice. And that is one of the things about old trucks. They're really fun to drive, but in today's day and age, we do a lot of highway, a lot of freeway, and over 70 miles an hour. I mean, they're not the safest things. They're not so comfortable. I've had panic stops in old trucks where inevitably what happens, Jason? You end up sideways, right? Because not all four brakes are grabbing at the same rate and you get a little bit of sideways. And the other thing too is, I don't know if you've noticed this, tell me if you have, but when you're driving an old vehicle, people in modern cars do not give you the cushion that you might need. Like they'll cut in front of you at a stoplight and just hit their brakes and they're fine, but like they've just taken away a good portion of your stopping distance. Things like that really matter if you're driving an old vehicle on a regular basis.
Yeah, it does, and with all that said, we're trying to make these as safe as new cars. We have, ABS we're getting ready to add into them, and traction control, things that people can choose to, connect. But it is tough, and, using good components definitely can make a difference, right? Get away from the drum brakes, get to disc brakes. Like, those tiny little upgrades are definitely, like, safety features that I highly recommend people making because, I mean, oftentimes, we jump in these old classics, we go for a cruise, we forget at times it's an old classic. Before we give anybody their car, if we finished a car, it's done. We just handed the keys to a guy today in his truck. He's strapping it down, heading out as we speak, and it has 1,000 miles on it. We're done. It's good to go.
Your builds are not cheap. I mean, people should know that.
I get a lot of hate mail, if you will, that we're so expensive and blah 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 blah, and I'm like, well, we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard, and so because of that, it requires us to keep things and toe the line so we're not tarnishing, what people are used to seeing our product, to be and what we're known for. And so we get a lot of people say, "Hey, if I just bring it in and you just squirt some paint on it for me and then, and then I'll finish it." And then I'm like, I can't. Like, "Well, why can't you do that?" And I said, "Well, there's plenty of people that'll do that for you." I says, "But you're going to tell them that Fat Fender Garage painted that." And I said, and that's not how we do things here. We don't paint that way. And so,
Yeah, and nothing's cheap anymore. I mean, even if you do it all yourself, you've got to figure in your own labor cost and everything. So,
no, no, we don't want to do that because that'll take all the fun out of it if you have to figure that out. But
it totally will. So, Jason, you've used the term hot rod. Is that how
mhm.
you think of the trucks, or do you think? I mean, We could call them resto mods, I suppose. We could call, like your Revival series is a classic truck. It looks period correct, but it's on a modern chassis and it's got modern underpinnings. And then your Designer series is more, I would call it like a pro street or street custom look.
I see what you're saying. So, like, resto mod is a definitely a term, people like to use and throw around for just upgrading engines and brakes and, some performance things and getting away from accurate restored vehicle, right? Like numbers matching. And I actually, when I see those like that, like, wow, this is impeccably put together. It literally is like it came off the showroom floor in 1958, whatever it was. That is amazing and beautiful. I don't wanna drive that. I do not wanna drive that. I know what that's going to drive like. And so, now I wouldn't mind having it in my garage and talking to people about it and saying, "This is what it looks like back then. This is what it looks like today when we're done with it, and you should go drive both of them, and you'll soon figure out real quickly that those upgrades take it from driving Miss Daisy to, like John Wick out there, just going to town, and so it really is if you wanna drive something, you're gonna have to do the upgrades, and I'm always a proponent, you know, brakes are really important, right? Brakes first, then after that, your fuel system, make sure that's intact, and then if you get to the point where you wanna upgrade your engine, go ahead and do that, but cosmetic is last, interiors are last, like, those are the things that, but you'll see people, first thing they do, and first thing I did when I got, like, an old truck is I just started sanding it because I wanted to make it pretty, and then it ran and drove like crap, but it looked good, So, but now I'm the opposite. If you can't afford to paint, just do the other stuff, skip out on the paint, and let's do the other stuff. You can always paint later. But yeah, kind of a resto mod, hot rodding, that's kind of that term, we're building hot rods, but at the end of the day, I just view them as old classic trucks with modern drivetrains, modern, suspension.
Do you source trucks for the builds, or does the customer bring them to you and say, "Hey, I want a Revival Series 1960 F100. Here's my truck."
Yeah, a lot of the revivals, these are vehicles that customers own. So I'd say about 90% of those are that way. It's been in their family for a long time. They just want to get it back on the road. And we do occasionally source some vehicles for people that, want them painted or something like that. I have a small collection, sometimes, you know, anywhere from the $3,000 to $7,000 range. I'll collect trucks and that are in good shape. So when that pops up, I can say, hey, I've got this one here. I paid 4 grand for it. You can have it for 5 grand, and you're off to the races. We don't have to go hunt something down and have it shipped in and all that kind of stuff.
I mentioned there's the Revival series, and then there's the Designer series. Let's kinda break those down a little bit.
So revival is generally your truck. We try really hard not to paint those. So I love to paint the inside. I love to paint the engine compartment. Those are easy, but it really is helpful to simplify it if it's something that's in decent enough shape. We don't fix any rust. It is what it is. And then we just take that and move it over to your chassis and then get that, finished up. We've had a few that we paint, and every time we paint something, paint is so expensive. And I'm almost embarrassed to even say how much it costs for us to paint something because we struggle with the idea that the Designer series, which is more of a bespoke, a la carte, whatever you want, or Revival series is like, you can't have that. It's mostly we try to tell you no. A lot of times they'll convince us into, could you put front and rear cameras on it? Can you do a few things, and you kind of cave because they're great people and you want to help them out, but then they just, the numbers just start going up, 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 up. So, but the Designer series is that custom one-off that you can't find anything like that. Nothing's been built like that. It's unique all on its own, and it was custom curated, design planned for that customer. And so it's gonna have it's gonna have everything, the kitchen sink and a box of cereal in there for you. But sometimes we'll do trucks where we don't do anything other than swap it over. They like the interior they have. We rewire the truck up, we put new fuel, plumbing, everything, AC, all that stuff's put in, and then they come pick it up and take it home.
Yeah. Do you do more Chevys or more Fords?
We do more Fords, by about 80/20.
Are you a Ford guy yourself?
Yes, I am, and I lean a little bit more that direction, although I don't have any reason to, like, not do Chevys. I'm not feeling like, well, I don't like Chevys. Some people are like, "Chevy only, piss on the Fords," and vice versa. And I'm more kind of like, I like them both, but when we do a Chevy, and we've got plenty that we've done, we wanna make sure that I always tease the Chevy guys. I'll say, because 'cause they'll see some of these Chevy trucks, like, "Man, this is the nicest Chevy I've seen. This is crazy." I said, "Who knew Ford guys built the best Chevys?"
There's a few things we may never solve in this world. Peace in the Middle East and Ford versus Chevy. It's just never going to end. I think it's mostly about what you grew up with, what your dad might have driven, there was multi-generational loyalty to a brand and
Mhm. Yeah, my dad worked in the Ford plant, my mom worked in the Ford plant, my grandma worked in the Ford plant, right? And, you'll get some of that, especially in the Midwest, some of those, areas where
yeah, and eventually they kind of become the family heirloom, right? Like you said, customers will bring you a truck that's been in the family for a long, long time and they just want to get it back on the road and make it usable again. Do you have a particular sweet spot personally, in terms of what years of Fords and Chevys you like most?
well, I did. It used to be, 1956 Ford, and it was the 67, 72 Chevy. Those were kind of like my go-to, but now we've done so many of all of them that it's hard to, like, just say I love one now, but it at one time, those were the 2 that I love. Still got a soft spot for the '56 Ford, because that was kind of like what I spent so much time with, a decade ago. Just I must have owned, 20 '56 Ford big back windows at one point,
Wow.
and so definitely like those, but the business has changed and I've changed with it, I'm growing and adapting and evolving and appreciating more now as I get a little bit older and see the value in all these other trucks and them kinda the customers getting excited about their build, and they got this 1957 Ford called the Refrigerator, and it's the ugliest truck Ford ever made, and when it's all done and you're just like, "You know what? It's kinda cute. I like it."
I think the ugliest truck Ford ever made was the unibody F100 from what was that, 62?
62, 61, yeah, 62, I have one, I have a 62 unibody, and it's a big window, and my wife's like, "What are we doing with this thing?" And it's bought it from the original owner. I says, "I don't know. I haven't decided, but I'm not ready to cut loose."
They're just kinda weird, the unibody design was weird. It was an interesting experiment. I love the '57 refrigerator Ford. I like that body style, but I like the fact that in '57, they only had 2 headlights versus 4 headlights starting in '58.
Mhm.
And then the other sweet spot for me there is the 1960 because the grill on the 60
Yeah.
is a little bit more stylized. The 58 and 59, they had that just stamped steel grill. It's to me, it's not as attractive. I love the 60 through 66 Chevrolets, particularly the ones with the knee knocker cab,
Yes, yes, yes.
wraparound windshield, and for people who don't know, the knee knocker was because the windshields were wraparound. The door actually was cut forward of the windshield, so when you got into the truck, you could smack your knees on the bottom of the windshield frame, so
Yeah, I think that ended in, like, '63, they changed that.
yeah, yeah.
I had one of those and, never built it because at the very end, I was like, "Well, I don't think," I had the double hump dash, right?
Yep.
And, so cool. I mean, If you could think of styling back then and styling today, right? And you look at how much creativity went into these things. They weren't aerodynamic. They didn't build anything based off fuel economy, based off, wind and sound and aerodynamics. That was much later. And so that's why everything looks similar today, right? You go look at trucks and you look at a Chevy, a Ford, a Dodge, a Toyota, you're like, wow, they're all starting to look very similar. Well, it turns out the wind tunnels produce kind of a very similar feature. And so, but back then you didn't go that fast and gas was cheap and style was, really important. And so wish it was a little bit more like that. I mean, it just, is what it is.
Not just trucks, but cars in general are all kind of looking the same these days. And that's another thing I think that has made the classic truck market so hot is that there's a real distinctive nature to all these old trucks.
Well, I mean, Ford, minus a few cars, they're mostly selling trucks.
Yes.
And people are just, they need a truck. You got to haul anything, or you got a little small family. A truck can oftentimes just fill that gap, for both sides of it. And so trucks are just huge. I mean, I think Ford of the F series built almost 850, 900,000 trucks last year.
It's incredible.
It's incredible, but yet they still can't produce enough because you still can't get certain trucks.
Yeah.
Can't get a Ford Raptor R to save your life, without paying $50,000 premium. They probably do that by design, but at the end of the day, trucks are real popular, and because they're popular today, the old classics have just gotten so popular, and I love it though.
By the way, Jason, we haven't talked about powertrain in your builds. I think we should touch on that a little bit. Obviously, for Fords, the Coyote is the hot engine.
It is so Chevy is got some great let's be honest. If it wasn't for GM and the LS platform, we wouldn't be having a Restomod, program that exists. The LS platform and the ease of swapping and having that kind of open source computer and be able to get in and play around with it really made, Restomodding what it is today. Quite frankly, Ford, until they came out with a Coyote, they had a 5.0, motor, but it sucked and it wasn't that great. And so, but when they came out with a Coyote, the 5.0, that modular motor, they finally had something to compete with the LS. And so it really helped Ford in the aftermarket. But until then, it wasn't very useful. And so, with the Chevys, you got the new LT1s, you got the LT4s, if you can scrounge one up. If you can't get one of those, I know Blueprint Engines has a nice drivetrain that competes with the LS stuff that, it's an LS base, but it's their own. And then you have, Ford that has the Coyote. Now, the Godzilla motor, have you heard of that?
Yes.
The Godzilla motor's kind of been coming around, but I still have a cautionary, tell I always, give people that it's going to do its job. It's going to sound great. It's going to sound amazing. But you're going to get 8 miles per gallon. You're going to have some struggles because it's not that efficient. It's a truck work, motor. And then when you take it out of its element, it doesn't really perform. I mean, it performs well, but it's not as efficient. So people will try to jam that motor into like a car or two-wheel drive small truck. And it's just a little, my opinion, just a little bit, wrong motor. The Coyote motor fits so much better, where that Godzilla motor works in four-wheel drive trucks.
Yeah.
I just always say, put it in a four-wheel drive truck all day long. If you want to do that, that's fine. You won't get good gas mileage. You're going to want to have a gigantic tank in there because you're going to need every ounce of it.
So, Jason, what's your waiting list like? I mean, I'm sure you've got plenty of projects in the shop right now.
Well, it kind of depends on what it is, but if we're doing a build like a revival series, it's right around 4 to 6 months generally. Kind of depends, before we can consider. And I'm not in charge of that piece of it, so I have to always refer to someone else. So we went from 1 employee, me, to 2 employees to 3 employees. We now have 75 employees here, so I can't manage all the little things. So we have people that manage the schedule and production. The designer series can be anywhere from 6 months to a year to get in, on those. This kind of depends. And it also depends, like, if it's something I'm really excited about, if it's got like a story or the customer or something that makes it a little bit more exciting, then, we'll try to see what we can do to, get them in.
People are gonna be curious about pricing, so give me an idea, like, let's say I've got, a '72 C10 and it's tired and I wanna put one of your chassis underneath it with a brand new, drivetrain, coilover, disc brakes, all of that. What are we looking at?
So to get a completely powder coated engine in it, fuel tank, fuel lines ran, brake lines ran, Chevy, throw an LT1 in there ready to go, full stainless steel exhaust, just as a general rule of thumb, between $60,000 to $65,000 for that chassis, completely ready to go. So that, four-wheel drive, if you want a four-wheel drive chassis, that's going to take you up in the neighborhood of about 85,000. It's just a much different application. A lot more components that go into it, transfer case and more drive shafts and another front end. So it's beefed up a little bit more, heavier duty, coilover shocks. And so um, Revival, a lot of people ask like, "Hey, I want to do a build." And so Revival series, I just tell people they start at about 185,000, including the chassis, and it goes up from there. Really, we kind of have to take a look at, I'd say on average, it can be 250 to 300 on average. People end up wanting to do more. Um, as much as 450, on people want paint, they just keep push. So it just depends, when I say, "Oh yeah, I want to do it," and it starts at, 180, 200,000 and they come in and then they wondered how we ended up at 450. There are reasons.
Yeah.
And then our designer series, we just tell people, if you want a custom one-off build and you want to go all the way, you want to win awards and all that kind of stuff, I just tell them you're going to start at about 500 and it goes up from there. You could be over 1 million. It's not that hard anymore. I tell people everything is expensive. Drivetrains are expensive. Labor's expensive. COVID kind of boosted all that stuff up and drove up inflation, and so now we've got things just the same thing is 30 to 40% higher than it was in, 6 years ago.
Well, on a designer series truck, I imagine you could easily have $50,000 in paint alone, paint and body.
You could have 150,000 easy in paint and body.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's sad, but I got $20,000 in materials, that
right.
filler and you name it. It's like, geez, it's expensive, and then the poor guys that are just sanding and sanding and sanding and sanding. And I'm even like, "You guys ever going to be done? Like, we need to move on to the next. We got to get this primered." But on the designer series, the gaps, there's no question they have to be right, and so it just takes time.
By the way, Mike Ring was telling me a while back that he still just loves to sand. Like, that's his sweet spot. It's so funny.
I've heard he's just happy being in the body shop,
Absolutely.
sanding, prepping, and I think that's awesome. For me, I put the headphones on, I go to the shop, I still today custom make all the wood beds and help design the finish on those, and I still fabricate those myself.
That's really cool. Yeah, you gotta keep your hand in. Interiors. We gotta talk about interiors really quick because you do these really interesting custom interiors, and I was looking at the website, and it looks like some of them are almost a heat molded, but the materials look like genuine leather. They look old world kind of, and I like that.
Yeah, we have a line of vinyl products you can get, and then we also have full leather wrap stuff you can get, and then all the different leather finishes. We have some stock colors that are like, "Hey, go online, click, buy your interior, we'll ship it to you in a box, ready to go. Brand new seat, brand new door panels, brand new, headliner, brand new, whatever you want. You can just order it up, we'll get it done in 4 to 6 weeks and ship it to you. Take you about 2 hours to install." Then people say, "Well, I want two-tone or I want this distressed leather, or I want this." And so, you can still order that stuff. It just takes it's a little bit more money because now we gotta, like, get more involved with you. We gotta spend more time to figure all this out and make sure all the thread matches, and so but it's fun. Yeah, it really is fun, and we love being able to just, offer people a quick solution. We do interiors for, builders building, SEMA projects where they just need a really nice quality interior that looks really great, but they don't have time for, a $150,000 avant-garde interior. They don't have time for that. They just need something different.
Very good stuff. Jason Noel from Fat Fender Garage. Check out the website. It's at fatfender.com, and you're at Fat Fender Garage on Instagram, right?
Yep. Facebook, we got Fat Fender, of course. I'm told we have a TikTok channel. That's what I'm told by the young kids. I'll trust them.
Awesome, man. I love the trucks, and thanks for coming on the show. This was fun.
Thank you for having me, and been a pleasure being on here, and you're such a great host. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, visit buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. And until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.